Nick, can you hear it okay?
Yeah, hear it good.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1, started.
Good morning, afternoon, and welcome to IAB Europe's dedicated webinar to the post-third-party cookie era. My name's Nick Welsh. I'm head of Programmatic for IAS in EMEA, and I'm also the elected chair for IAB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee. So I'm thrilled to be your host this morning, as the third-party cookie era is a key topic on the Programmatic Committee's work plan. So since Google first announced the deprecation of third-party cookies in Chrome, myself and IAB Europe have been working with members and stakeholders to prepare for this transition. So now with the deadline set for 2024, this webinar will look at how prepared companies from this new era are and seeing what progress has been made. And as we prepare to enter a new year, we'll be also looking at what's next as we head towards a cookieless world. So if we jump through to the next slide. So we'll start by hearing from Drew and Andrew Hayward-Wright, who's the Group Commercial Director for Strategic Partnerships at Seen This, and is also the Programmatic and Sustainability Advisor for IAB Europe, who will provide an overview and status updates on the post-third-party cookie conversation. Followed by Drew, we will then have a presentation from Sebastian Grants, who's the Privacy Manager for EMEA Industry Relations at Google, and he'll present an update on Google's Privacy Sandbox. Then following those two presentations, we'll then host a panel discussion with some of industry titans to delve a little bit deeper into those topics. So just as a bit of a reminder, we are live today, so very much welcome questions from you, the audience. And if you do have any questions for the presenters or panelists, please add these to the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then I will try and address these to our speakers at the end of the session. So if we bump through to the next slide. Okay, and now it gives me great pleasure to kick off today's sessions by introducing you to Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Nick. I would just share my screen and jump into this. Right, so we thought before we dived into a panel and discussed in depth, we give a bit of an overview and a look back on what's happened in 2022 and a look forward in 2023 to set the scene. And it's no doubt that 2022, there's been a lot of noise, and it's been a really busy year for digital advertising, not just in the sense of post third-party cookie, but we've had the continued rise of conversations around sustainability of digital advertising. We have new mediums, or continued focus on new mediums such as connected TV, and we also have new kind of offerings in the space of, for example, retail media coming to the forefront due to surges in online shopping off the back of COVID-19. But it's important, I think, that we remember that we need as an industry to remain focused on solving the post third-party cookie problem and challenge. Currently, we're faced with the situation that 30% of audiences are browsers with no third-party cookies, so Safari and Mozilla. But Google represents 65% of the browser market. So when the change does occur and does happen, the impacts are going to be at a much larger scale. So it's not the time to take foot off the gas, so to say. And there's been a great recent study by Low2Me that showed that positive signs and waves in the industry. There's a 50% increase in testing of probabilistic solutions from marketeers and publishers across the industry. So that's really positive to see that there is continued focus. And we need to do so, as the IB study showed that around 50 to 60% of signal fidelity has been lost from third-party identifiers due to changes being made by browsers and operating systems. Then we need to remember that the digital advertising industry is of an immense value, not just to ourselves, given that in Europe it was valued at around 92 billion euros, but also for wider socio-economic impacts. So recent study this year by IB Europe, Dr. Daniel Knapp, highlighted that the importance of targeted advertising is immense for organizations down to SMEs, with 57% of them using what they refer to as smart planning that uses targeting in some way, shape or form. And it's not just our industry and businesses that benefit from digital advertising, targeted advertising. It's also the consumers, with 76% of users preferring a customized experience, whether it be on a website or through to the ads that they see on day-to-day basis. So an immense amount of value and importance in solving this addressability problem and solving the challenge of what to do when the cookie disappears. And as I said, there's been a lot that has occurred, and obviously we'll start, and I won't go into too much detail because we've got Sebastian who's going to talk a bit more about Google's changes, but I'm sure everyone is aware of the big headline topics that the deprecation of the cookie on Google has been shifted to 2024, which gives us more of a runway to test and trial. It's been really positive to see the testing stepping up by third parties in our space as well. The other shift, a notable shift, was a shift to topics from Flock, and I'm sure we'll hear more on that from Sebastian in a couple of moments. But it's also important not for us to just focus on Google and the changes in Google. We obviously have the other big browsers in the market, and Apple iOS changes, with ATT now having at least a full year of impact to be assessed. One of the big headlines that we saw was Facebook predicting a $10 billion loss for 2022. Now, obviously, this is not just driven through ATT and Apple privacy policy changes and IDFAs going away, or the use of them changing. There's other headwinds such as the pandemic, the economic situation, and possible other investments into different sectors by Meta or Facebook. It's now believed that up to 62% of users are using the opt-out option within ATT. So this is where I talk about, it's not just about an impact on Facebook, but that impact is going to be felt by other app developers and other web publishers, open web publishers as well. As a bellwether of the impacts and changes we need to be cognizant of, Apple's own search business has grown at the same time, now sitting at about 94% of channel adoption, where it was previously 74%. And there's the last final point that rumors are swirling around, that Apple potentially is launching a DSP, with a couple of job posts being seen online. So yet to be seen if that's the case, but it is a strong indicator that it could be something that arises in 2023. But let's take a look at what's going on in the rest of the market outside of the browsers. So it's positive to see that there have been shifts and developments. And I mentioned before, the Lodemy study pointed out that 50% at least now marketers and publishers are testing. These stats from Sincera IO are really positive. We can see a large amount of identifiers being seen in the market and adopted for testing, with ID5 leading the way, around 66,000 instances. But in other news, in 2022, we saw Google announce support for seller-defined audiences, which is an amazing step forward for industry collaboration. We've also seen solutions such as Adform ID Fusion help advertisers navigate the growing identity landscape, with multiple ID solutions now in market, posing the question of which one to choose, which one to test, and how many to run at the same time. However, we do still have challenges and concerns around certain scalability of solutions and performance of solutions, with email still being challenged on that scale front and potentially being mixed in with third-party data. And then finally, on the last one, data clean rooms, always worth mentioning that 48% of publishers are now using data clean room in some way, shape or form. to test and try first-party data relationships. So positive steps forward, but obviously a lot more for us to do and talk about, I'm sure, going into 2023. We mustn't also forget that legislation always hangs in the background and changes do happen. We all saw earlier this year, or not that long ago, UK decided to put the handbrake on, moving away from the European Union's GDPR and rethinking their approach. That's kind of been one that's been ongoing for some time, so we'll see what happens. But we do have the CCPA expiration date coming January 2023, which means that we'll see that come into effect. There's more talk of localized state laws, so making it more and more complex for multinational organizations to navigate privacy laws at a global scale. But the good news is we saw this year IB Tech Lab finalizing the GPP, or Global Privacy Platform, that is starting to help organizations navigate consent signals when dealing with multiple jurisdictions and legislation, but one that I'm sure no doubt will continue to evolve in 2023 and keep us on our toes with having to navigate that area. Now, I mentioned at the very start that obviously it's been a noisy year, not just for third-party cookie deprecation and new targeting solutions, but there's been a lot of other movements. And one thing in thinking is, okay, how can we cut through the noise and keep focus on finding solutions? Well, potentially one way is to look at how we can use those trends and themes and new solutions with a privacy focus in mind. So CTV is a great example where you can almost look at digital potentially being the bellwether for other mediums, where CTV is skipping straight to potentially a universal ID solution and going in on privacy from an ID perspective there. I mentioned retail media as well as a new emerging trend. This in itself presents possible opportunities for closed loop targeting, where we have high levels of signed in users and can potentially help support email sign-in solutions in terms of that scalability and first-party data challenges that we've seen as well. And then lastly, on the sustainability narrative, a continued consideration for how we use targeting, where we use targeting, and how we test targeting in a most sustainable way, understanding what cloud resources, cloud infrastructure resources take, machine learning and AI also takes, and making sure that we think about the sustainability from an economic and environmental standpoint. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour of what has kind of happened, an overview and some thinking points for 2023. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Nick. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Drew. Certainly given us a lot of food for thought, and yeah, lots of info for us to kind of perhaps be discussing on the panel later. And again, if you've got questions for Drew or the panelists, please and put them into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to them at the end of the session. So very much looking forward to hearing other stakeholders' thoughts. So before we bring on the panel, I'd like to welcome our final guest speaker, Sebastian Grants, who's the Privacy Manager and EMEA Industry Relations at Google, who will be providing an update on the Privacy Sandbox. Over to you, Sebastian.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Let me bring up my slides. Can you see my slides now? Can you see my?
No, I can't see your slides yet, Sebastian. It says you're sharing your screen, but it's looking like a dark screen at the moment. Perfect. All good.
Amazing. All right, so thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to give you a short update on the Privacy Sandbox and with a focus on what's ahead in 2023. So as you know, Chrome kicked off the Privacy Sandbox for the web back in August 2019, so it's already been a while since we've been on this journey. And earlier this year, we also announced that we're bringing the Sandbox to Android as well. Just as a reminder, the core objective across both efforts is to fundamentally improve user privacy by limiting cross-site or app tracking and to ensure that businesses have the tools they need to succeed online. And I want to start with a short analogy from the automotive industry because it occurred to me that the automotive industry's journey to becoming more sustainable may offer insights for the digital ads industry as well. So first, accelerating consumer demand for more sustainable transportation has ignited industry innovation. So a movement that started with just one or two companies now has the largest manufacturers committed to going electric to not be left behind. In our industry, we are seeing consumers increasingly demand more privacy from the internet experience. And any company risks being left behind if they aren't working on making the online experience more private. The second element is people are willing to adapt their behavior for a more sustainable solution. For our industry, the transition to greater privacy means we need to rethink our solutions and adapt our practices. We shouldn't think about electric cars as a shorter range version of petrol-powered cars, but a new mode of transportation that is fundamentally more sustainable for the planet. So this means privacy-preserving ad solutions won't be a one-to-one replacement of today's ads products that operate with less data, but will address the core business needs of marketers and publishers in a way that sustain and increase user trust. And third and final point is regulation follows consumer expectations. We are now seeing higher and higher emission standards, and just recently the EU approved an effective ban on new petrol-powered cars from 2035. And similarly in ads, we're seeing more laws legislate the types of data and amount of data that can be used for targeted advertising. I think it's really remarkable how far the automotive industry has transitioned in just a matter of years. Obviously, it hasn't been easy or straightforward, but there's no doubt it is bringing a better future for consumers and for manufacturers that embrace this change. And this leads me now to the vision for Privacy Sandbox that was also started to meet users' increased demand for more privacy and involve both rethinking and building together. So the first step is there's a platform changes that Sandbox will introduce on web and Android. This includes new privacy-preserving API for a wide range of use cases, as well as changes to mitigate cross-site user tracking. And second, a very important part is the Sandbox by itself cannot solve the challenge of cross-site user tracking that I just discussed earlier. It provides a set of capabilities, like a toolkit, if you will, that the industry can use to build more private solutions. And this is really where the real transformation will happen. We expect that these new solutions will utilize a range of capabilities in addition to Sandbox. For example, machine learning can play a key role in deriving maximum value from privacy-safe signals. And certainly first-party data approaches would play a major part as well. And finally, we really believe that the Sandbox must be developed in a transparent, open and collaborative fashion, working with stakeholders from across the ecosystem to make sure these new technologies work for everyone, because only then can we fundamentally improve user privacy. And I think it's fair to say this is really a big and complex undertaking for the whole industry, with a wide range of technologies covering multiple use cases and not just advertising. And so you see, Privacy Sandbox is way more than just the ads APIs or proposals that are being discussed most of the time. The aim is to provide better alternatives for legacy technologies like third-party cookies, so companies can continue to build digital businesses while protecting user data. And as we develop privacy-preserving advertising solutions, the Privacy Sandbox will be one of the building blocks. However, it's not a standalone solution on its own. Building a more private internet requires innovation from across the industry. We expect that companies will use Privacy Sandbox in combination with other privacy-safe signals, including first-party data and contextual signals. And I think there's really so much opportunity for innovation ahead of us, and it's really excited to see how companies adapt their solutions to meet the expectations of users ahead of us. So what does the roadmap look like and what can you expect? At a high level for Chrome, this year, 2022, has been about early technical integration, launching the APIs for technical testing and having the ad tech companies effectively kick the tires on the ads API proposals. Android joined the Privacy Sandbox in February and is implementing similar ads technologies as Chrome on their platform. They started a bit later on the journey, but are catching up quickly. So let's look at 2023. The focus for 2023 will be on early solution testing as the ad tech companies start embedding the Privacy Sandbox technologies into their future solution of sets. For the first half of the year, it will very much be test and learn. We expect the testing to be focused on individual APIs to give directional utility learnings. There will be a range of results in these early tests as developers bring their unique methodologies, approaches, and learnings. And we're looking forward to feedback in this timeframe to help understand how specific parameters of the API proposals influence results. In the second half of the year, we launched the APIs to all Chrome users, which will enable testing of the sandbox technologies at scale, in combination and across the ecosystem. At this point, ad tech companies will have integrated these APIs into their solutions alongside the rest of the privacy-preserving capabilities that are available. And with this, we gain meaningful insights into the results for marketers and publishers in a world without third-party cookies. And at this stage, we also have scaled coordinated testing across the industry. Just recently, the British Competition and Markets Authority recently proposed a framework for such a program, and we really look forward to working with the CMA and industry and the whole industry on this effort. And if we look even further ahead, 2024 will be about preparation for third-party cookie deprecation. After launching the Sandbox APIs next year, there will be a full year to integrate the solutions and optimize the results. And we will continue to improve the technologies in this timeframe based on feedback from the ecosystem. So with 2 years to go, roughly, to third-party cookie deprecation in Chrome, what should you do? If you're an ad tech company, SDK, or integrator of the non-ads APIs, now is really the time to focus on your future strategy. Reimagine your future solution set with privacy as a priority and test the Privacy Sandbox APIs. If you're a marketer, publisher, or app developer of any size, develop your own vision for how your company will meet the evolving ecosystem expectations on privacy. And finally, trade bodies and agencies will also play an important role in the privacy-forward future by coordinating testing across companies and driving thought leadership in this space. And as I mentioned earlier, collaboration is core to how we are developing the Privacy Sandbox. We're really grateful for the engagement from many, many partners across the industry who already contributed ideas, shared feedback on the design proposals, and are now have already tested, or will be testing soon. Some of the early testers are from Europe, and it would be important to have even more European testers to make sure that really our region's needs are heard when those technologies are developed. And you may have seen recently the first companies like RTB House, Zander, Criteo have shared their early insights from their first tests with the Privacy Sandbox APIs, and this is really great and meaningful feedback that really help develop these technologies, and we're really looking forward to seeing more of this in the near future. So with that, thanks again for the opportunity to discuss the Privacy Sandbox. If you're interested in learning more, here's some resources where you can get both overall information on Sandbox as well as more technical materials, including developer guidance. And with this, I'm really looking forward to the conversation with my other panelists, and hand it back over to you, Nick.
Awesome job, Sebastian. Thank you so much. That was really useful to see, and obviously a perfect segue into our panel discussion. To look back and assess the cookie conversation in 2022 and dive into what we can expect to see over the next 12 months. So let's welcome back Andrew, who will be moderating the session. So over to you, Andrew, to introduce the panel.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Sebastian, for overview and setting up hopefully a really interesting conversation. So I'm going to let the panel do a quick introduction of themselves before we dive in, and their role and kind of focus within the identity targeting post third-party cookie space. So why don't we start with yourself, Tom?
Sorry?
Did you just want to introduce your role and your focus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Tom Peruzzi. What a perfect start with not getting the question. So I'm CTO and speaker of the management board of Virtual Minds, which is an ad tech holding with our brands, which are maybe a little bit more known, like Edition, the Ad Server, SSP, Yield Lab, DSP, Active Agent. We are mainly concentrated on mid-Europe, and we are active members of IAB Tech Lab and IAB Europe as well. So happy to be there. Many thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Amina?
Hi, thank you for having me. So my name's Amina, I work at Xander. I've spent probably the last 2 years thinking about identity and cookieless and sort of helping our publishers get ready for the impending cookie deprecation. So really excited to be here and kind of share some of those insights.
Excellent. And Susanna?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Zuzana Galinska, the Managing Director of Xaxis. As Group M's programmatic managed service, obviously, it's been very key for us to understand what the ecosystem can and will provide going forward, how we pick the best solutions for our clients, and effectively how we also address the increasing privacy demands of consumers. So a very broad view from me, but I've been working obviously in the programmatic/data space for many, many years, almost double digit now. So it's been a topic close to my heart for some time.
Very excellent. And Sebastian, do you want to just round out, remind people your role and focus, and we'll jump into the question.
Yeah. So my name is Sebastian. I'm the privacy manager in the EMEA, Google's EMEA team that is working with trade bodies across Europe.
Brilliant, excellent. So I think the best way to start is Sebastian taking from his analogy of the automotive industry and creating a better future for users and manufacturers, and also on the notion of testing and collaboration. What does everyone, like, throughout the course of 2022, what have you looked at testing? Have you done testing of solutions, whether it's previously Sandbox through to others, and how has the progress gone for yourselves? And then maybe we can talk about as an industry. Amina, did you want to kick us off with that?
Absolutely. So firstly, great presentation from Sebastian on Privacy Sandbox. I think it's great to see that evolving and moving in the right direction. We know that Chrome won't solve for addressability across the ecosystem. So when we look at the topic of cookieless, we are looking at a broad range of solutions. I think just thinking about fledgling topics and testing for that going forward and going into next year, one of the lessons that I guess everyone learned from flock testing was scale testing is really what we need to understand the true impact. So seeing scale testing for topics going into next year will be interesting, and test partners who can really provide feedback. So it'll be quite something to look into that next year. In terms of what we've been involved in and what we've been looking at, as I mentioned, a broad number of solutions. I think where we've seen a lot of impact is first-party data solutions. I've spent a lot of time working with publishers, really helping them understand and figure out their data strategies, and basically using the Xandr platform to kind of act on that first-party data. We've seen some great results from things like first-party data marketplaces in the Nordics, and we've seen that scale out this year, which has been really exciting. And I think one last call out that I'd probably make out is it was really exciting this year to see seller-defined audiences sort of come to the forefront, a really exciting thing from IAB Europe, and I think we'll sort of see that going into next year.
Excellent. And Susanna, from your side of things, how's it progressed? Have you had that focus on first-party data as well that Amina mentioned?
Yeah, so the role of Xaxis, as we sort of sit across the breadth of Group M agencies, is really looking to see what's in the market, what's being developed, and curating the best solutions for our agency partners and their clients. And our testing broadly from a programmatic perspective sort of sits in 4 buckets and 4, I would say, core areas that are absolutely critical to the success of programmatic activation. So we look at attribution, we look at campaign insights and measurements, we look at privacy first targeting, and we also look increasingly at first party data onboarding. So our testing sort of spans broadly those 4 absolutely critical areas, I would say. And we predominantly have a sort of two types of work streams for testing, if you like. One is looking at platform solutions. So let's take DV360's targeting expansion or Xandr's advanced frequency capabilities, and we're sort of testing in platform capabilities and benchmarking them against each other and seeing in different environments, in different campaigns, where are we seeing the best results. But in addition to that, we're also increasingly testing what we call cross-platform capabilities, and that's really sort of leveraging deeper on functionality like AI. So we have Copilot, and looking at things, for instance, like search algorithms or contextual algorithms to do more than just one environment. So for us, it's really an ongoing thing. This year has been a continuation, so it's not just something that we've just really embarked on, because often our agencies come to us and they don't just want to understand what's the best partner for this plan or the best solution, but how does it benchmark? What kind of results can I expect? And so we need to have that knowledge bank. So for us, it's a continued evolution, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. It's one that, as we kind of like pointed out, it's been in an issue for a while, but it's going to continue to, and we'll have to continue to evolve, whether it be legislation or new solutions coming to market. And Tom, from your perspective, the focus of the last 12 months and progress of testing.
Yeah, so with regards to Mid-Europe, beside more activities on first party, like Amira said already, we've seen a lot of tests, even cross-publisher cases, on making use of identity solutions and how to best lever them, not only with regards to the typical suspects like frequency capping and stuff like that, but then making use of somehow marrying identity solutions with first-party data sets, and even thinking far beyond what we've seen in the past, which was a little bit, I don't want to say surprising, but what automatically comes up when you think about those new solutions is that even new needs for regulations came up. This is where we spent a lot of time in this year, which is maybe it's still more a German topic, but it's called first-party correlated addressability, which is now taken over to the IAB Tech Lab, where especially mid-Europeans want to take care on mid-European publishers want to take care on what happens to their identifiers when they're spread to the world. So there's still some concern, but we've seen a lot of tests, positive tests, which all show the theoretical aspects of identities becoming true. And what we've seen too is that maybe it's not the technological challenge so far, but it's much more a challenge of collaboration, because you have to bring all partners on board. You have to bring all of them on the table and make sure that they all think think and talk about the same KPI and what it means to them and how things change. So it's like Sebastian said in his presentation, it's much more, it's standardization, having all different stakeholders of the programmatic chain on one table. That's the interesting, or sometimes a little bit long-lasting part.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good segue question into for I guess I'll pose this one to Sebastian. Is around, you mentioned the collaboration, more a challenge of collaboration there. Sebastian, from your perspective of the testing and privacy sandbox and the progression of the industry, what do you think that we're in a state of disruption at the moment? What's the biggest challenges that you've seen and Google has seen throughout the course of this year, addressing the cookieless world?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is at the beginning, I think we saw initially more testers from the US, and that European companies were more hesitant to test these new technologies, but which was a bit tricky to see, because right now is the challenge. Now is the time to provide feedback and shape these new technologies, and because otherwise those technologies will work for US companies, but not so much for European companies. We have seen now more interest from European companies to test those solutions, so which is great and really encouraging, because we really need more European voices in here. So I think at the beginning there was some uncertainty, and as Tom mentioned, really the challenge of bringing all parties together. But also on the other hand, I heard from, for example, publishers that they have solutions in place already that work without cookies, but they're lacking demand. So how can we make sure that also the buy-side advertisers can easily kind of test these new solutions? And especially in a time where probably there will be a huge focus on spending marketing budgets wisely because of budget pressure. So I think making sure that those new solutions will be tested, then produce those case studies that we can also show to agencies and Susanna's clients, to show, hey, these results are working and this is what can you expect. So I think more focus on case studies, success cases, is important going forward.
Drew, if I can
just
jump in, thank you, to follow that. Because we've, in the first 20 minutes, we've heard the word testing, and I think the reality is brands are really starting to suffer testing fatigue. There is a lot of complexity in the market. Whilst there are many solutions coming out, there is huge fragmentation. And actually the cost and investment into testing, because it's a testing environment, isn't necessarily driving the ROI that brands expect and need. And this pressure was in place, even before the current economic impact and downturn that happened in Q3. In fact, I was in Cannes with Yahoo. They ran a customer advisor board, and they had 3 globally recognized brands at the table. And I was really opened my eyes up to how much frustration there was from these brands at just the lack of cohesion within the industry. And 2 of them had actually said, we're just stopping, we're not doing anything. We will wait till the end of 2024, and we're just, we're happy to pull back, because we just cannot continue to take our money, take our resources of time and people for this just continued evolution of testing. So I just think, we really have to be cautious. On the one hand, of course, we want new solutions coming out and we want brands leaning in, but there is a sort of limit to which brands are going to just have that willingness to test. If I can, actually, I just will mention one test that maybe takes us slightly on a different angle. And it's something that we've been really seeing gain very positive momentum. And it's sort of going back to a little bit of a retro way of managing, I guess, targeting on a broader sense, which is geo targeting and activation. So Xaxis increasingly is running omni-channel campaigns, and the more different environments you are in, obviously, the more that complexity of being able to connect identifiers becomes. But there is one constant that you can have in digital out of home to broadcast TV, et cetera, and that is geo targeting. And we found that to be a really powerful way of being able to sort of step away from some of the complexities of identity targeting and really look at going back to, you know, how arguably campaigns were planned and brought, you know, from the outset of media. And we found geo-targeting campaigns. We did one recently for cancer research, where we ran an omni-channel activation, geo-targeted to the locations where they wanted to have sign-ups for Race for Life, for their big charitable fundraiser, and we actually saw a phenomenal 700K in efficiencies off the back of geo-targeting and being able to optimize in flight with omni-channel capabilities. But it really sort of opened our eyes up to maybe continuing to press down the route of that sort of one-to-one marketing and identity targeting. Maybe that isn't the only solution, and we should look and go back to some of the other targeting and other capabilities that have been in place.
That makes sense. Sometimes going back to your grassroots is the best solution,
Yeah.
rather than overcomplicating it. Amina or Tom, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Susanna's made some really interesting points and some completely valid points as well. I think one of the themes that I've seen for 2022 is definitely frustration around the proliferation of all of these different tests and different technologies. I think what we've seen success with is sort of utilizing the tech that we already have to kind of, you know, that clients are familiar with, to kind of then use for these use cases. And one example is our Curate technology, where we kind of use that technology to sort of sell inventory and first party data. Give me a second, the lights have gone off. There we go. So I think that's a perfect example where we've been able to use the technology that already exists, that clients are familiar with, that can sort of preserve, you know, privacy, etc., to sort of alleviate the frustration of new technology being constantly put in hands of clients. I think there's definitely a cost benefit argument that needs to happen though with all of the different solutions that are coming out. If we can prove the value going forward, then obviously brands, publishers, etc., will want to test where value can be proved, and you know, we've got examples to show that. So I think those are the things that we kind of need to think about. But I think Susanna's also right in the sense that budgets will be tightening across the board going into next year. So if there are solutions where testing is going to be complex, we need to think about how we sort of fund that or get partners on board.
And Tom, any?
Yeah, I totally agree on both of you. It's just one more comment. What I think there's a difference in all those kinds of testings. There are those tests like testing emerging technologies, like taking part in supporting Google Sandbox and stuff like that. And then there is testing of solutions which are already in the market, and which, for whatever reason, advertisers and agencies tend to retest, even if there are positive results already out there. Like we've seen in identity cases, we do repeat those tests more or less on same setups all the time, just to make sure that every advertiser has the same feeling that this is the right solution going forward, and that they can see the numbers matching what numbers were presented already in the press before. So there's some kind of testing new technologies or really emerging technologies versus making sure that all the test results on the market are valid and that you can jump on that train, because somehow it seems to start moving already. So I really like that idea of reusing technology, which supports us even in a non-third party cookie way, but still sometimes it needs to be retested in order to make sure it fits the standards and fits the desired needs. Is that
when, so you say retesting, even though there's like valid case studies in market, is that from a brand's perspective? Do you think that is down to a lack of education, lack of trust, understanding, or they just want to know in relation to their own brand specifically it will work? Could be a mixture of everything.
I think it's a mixture of everything a little bit. You know, I think there's no company out there having free resources which you can push on new technologies just to get a better understanding of it. So whenever those tests pop up, there's some kind of need which has to be fulfilled, and so I think it's more fitting into the timeline of your customers in order to make them ready to use those solutions. And then you simply have to retest in order to make them sure that that solution works for them independently of where it's coming from. I guess it's mostly a resource topic and not an interest topic.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So the main thing there is we need to avoid burnout, test in smart ways, potentially use existing solutions that we know are tried and tested. And I think there's also an element of, unfortunately, sometimes our industry does chase the new and greatest shiny thing. And as I kind of tried to highlight in presentation, a lot has happened. New topics have come out, and no doubt those have diverted some attention away from this this issue of post-cookie. But I think what remains true is we need to find a way to navigate through. So I guess with that and looking at the time we've got left, if we think and look to like 2023, it's clear that collaboration is required, but what do we think, like, what are potentially the blockers for progressing? And then it's a double question. And then if we can remove those blockers, what do we think, like, what are the things we're going to see in 2023? I might start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, I think one of the blockers we saw, I mean, we just heard testing fatigue from brands to some degree, but also I think the one hand, it was a good thing that Chrome delayed the deprecation of third-party cookies again, but on the other hand, I think it created less urgency, and everyone was taking like a step back. So, but I think now really, I think as we see that the development is progressing, the deadline is getting closer. So I think we'll be seeing more testing on technical testing, but also like later this year or 2023, more scale testing, different technologies from Privacy Sandbox perspective, different APIs used in combination together with all the other solutions that are in place already, contextual signals, first-party data. And I think this will be something that we'll be seeing more often. And I just want to highlight, I think one thing that we also need to focus on, there's so much conversation around addressability and finding the right audiences, which is obviously super important. But to me, it feels like we're missing a little bit on the measurement and part of the conversation, because we see that, like, not only with the deprecation of third-party cookies, content requirements, etc., also lead to less observable data. And we also need to make sure that advertisers are in a position where they can still effectively measure the effectiveness of their campaign investment. Because if they cannot measure if it's effective, there will probably less incentive to invest in these new solutions. And there are already some solutions in place how we can bridge the consent, for example, gap where we are losing observation or data because of missing consent, and that we even invest more time and resources into finding solutions for the measurement challenge that is also ahead of us.
Amina, what's your thoughts on what's to come, potentially what blockers, hurdles we have to overcome?
Yeah, I think in terms of blockers and hurdles, I think Sebastian sort of mentioned a lot of what we're seeing. It's going to be sort of figuring out the resourcing, figuring out the timing. In terms of what's to come in 2023, I think I see definitely patterns between this and things like sustainability, where simplifying the supply chain is really going to make everyone's life easier, because that's what really causes the confusion of sort of what's happening in the ecosystem. So I definitely see a path to simplification next year and consolidation. I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's been so many solutions out there this year. We just have to simplify it next year in order for us to really make progress. So that's what I'm hoping for next year. Let's see whether that pans out.
Great. And Tom, your thoughts for the year ahead?
Yeah, the blockers, I think what what a lot of people prevent from jumping on the train is a little bit the legal situation on will it stay like that? Will it become stricter? And not only with regards to data privacy, but even data consumer rights. So I think this will be with us for the next year as well. So somehow we are used to it, but I think that will be an ongoing discussion, which somehow makes all the progress we have to have not that easy as hoped. I do think that 2023 will be an interesting year for everything which is interest driven, whether it's the privacy sandbox, or that it's seller-defined audiences, or that it's some publisher cohorted data with letting publishers define the interests. But I think we will see a lot of automation, a lot of standardization, and a lot of usage hopefully there as well for 2023.
Brilliant, thank you. And to wrap us up, Zuzana, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll bring this one home. So one of the really big blockers that I see, and especially as I've moved into Xaxis and have been sort of engaging directly on these topics with brands, is that the moment you step away from subject matter experts and say digital practitioners and speak sort of more at the CMO table, there's a real lack of comfort with the concept of modeled data. And I think, as an industry, because we have to date been so measurable and been able to account for every single last impression and last click, I think we've sort of set that precedent, and now we're moving away and trying to introduce, and again, the fragmentation of these solutions hasn't helped. But I think that's a really big education piece where we need advertisers to feel comfortable with adopting different type of modeling approaches, just in order so they can, continue to scale their activity, because few will have that richness of first-party data that will really be required to continue to make programmatic and digital so effective. So I would say that's a big one for us to address. In terms of looking forward, and I'll sort of build a little bit on what Amina said. So if we look at the sort of key themes or trends that have been building this year that are certainly going to be front and center next year, sustainability, DE&I, these are very much focused around responsible investment, the right investment for people and planet. And so moving away from just, what do we need to do with data to do better marketing? But actually, I think data would also sort of come under that responsible investment piece and start to move more into a data ethics consideration. Just because we can target, does that mean we should? And is that the right approach for my brand, especially when we continue to focus around that kind of one-to-one targeting strategy? And actually Group M, it's something they've had in place for a while, but it's becoming a sort of, I guess, more in demand and front and center is they have a data ethics compass that a client can plug into, put in place the different targeting strategies that they are considering or exploring, and it will really give a sort of consistent view as to the data ethics of that. And some score higher and some score lower. And I think re-educating brands around, moving away from some of those targeting practices, although they might be compliant, are they really ethical? Are they really in the right consideration of the consumer? And I think just we're going to see so much on the sustainability and, which is the right thing, and the D&I front. I definitely think that sort of more consumer consideration and looking at data through a consumer lens will be growing in prominence as well.
Brilliant. That's a really nice data ethics. The can versus should question is really important. A nice way to wrap it up. Well, thank you so much all, Sebastian, Zuzana, Amina, and Tom, for taking the time to go through and have a chat today. I'm going to hand it back to Nick because we have quite a few audience questions to see if we can field a few of those.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Zuzana, Tom, Amina, and Sebastian. Really, really good and interesting discussion. An awful lot to think about as the audience obviously have felt themselves. We have a number of questions that have come through, so let's see if we can get to some of these. So one of the first questions that we've had come up is around with the discussion of kind of clean rooms and privacy sandbox. And the question here is, with the mention of clean rooms and privacy sandbox, are there any insights with respect to how all of this connects? So CMP to CDP to clean room to SSP, etc. How easy is it to connect the dots, right? Who would like to take that question? I'm sensing no one. I'll pick someone.
I can jump in with a less technical point of view. I mean, it's, clean rooms don't sort of exist in and of themselves. They exist to function and allow data to be shared into the other environments you've just mentioned. And they've been a great development in enabling brands to feel more confident with, especially under the sort of the regulations of GDPR, to feel more confident in still being able to pass their data into all of the different digital environments. So I think it's, it's a really important development. And I think you've got clean rooms that sit sort of predominantly in the walled gardens, but then you also have independent ones. So the good news is there is choice, a breadth of choice across the industry as well.
Yeah, maybe I can add to this. I think the idea of the privacy sandbox is to limit data sharing. So I think there's the idea of sandbox is not to share any user data with the clean room. And as Susanna mentioned, I think it's a safe way for advertisers and publishers to share the data, collect the data. But privacy sandbox data is not meant to be shared across publishers. So it's really actually the opposite that we want to achieve with this. So I think we'll be slightly different. Sandbox will play a different role in this scenario.
And just on that, I think the second question is kind of a nice segue. So we've got privacy sandbox, which is all about limiting data sharing, putting privacy first. We have then clean rooms, which is all about extracting data in a safe way so that it can be used in a way that is privacy compliant. So with those in mind, the next question is, does the panel think that conversion attribution with the loss of third-party cookies, is it going to be harder to replace than targeting, or do they feel its loss will be greater or less pressing a problem to solve? I think given the fact that privacy sandbox isn't about sharing data in clean rooms, is about sharing data in a privacy compliant way, I mean, that's going to in itself make conversion tracking almost impossible. But so what's the feeling? How do we answer that question?
I can take a quick stab at this one. I think there's no denying that measurement going forward is going to be tricky, but it has been in the past anyway. When you think about omnichannel buying, there's various different formats of buying, which has meant that measurement itself is very disparate. I think looking into the future, one thing that we've sort of come to accept is that KPIs probably need to be reevaluated anyway. And I think this is a good opportunity to do that going forward. And I think secondly, I think measurement of the future has to involve and look at partnerships to really be able to do it properly, just because I don't think any one provider will be able to provide an end-to-end view on what measurement looks like.
Yeah, and just to add one thing is that if we have a look at what's happening currently, that we talk more and more about bringing the whole programmatic chain to server communication, then measurement is to be changed anyhow. So I think we will see changes in measurement in the next couple of months anyhow.
So maybe.
Yeah. Sorry, I agree. I mean, I mentioned it previously. I think the measurement conversation and challenge is, to me, as important as the addressability challenge. I'm quite confident that we will be able to find the right audiences with a combination of sandbox signals, contextual signals, first-party data. I think I'm really confident in this. The measurement challenge, to me, I think is, as mentioned, as important. And we have some solutions like proposals in place, attribution reporting API, one of the proposals of the privacy sandbox to address this. But it will be just one of many solutions that we need to think about to really make sure we can measure advertising effectiveness as we've done in the past.
Thanks, Sebastian. So we're pretty much out of time now. I just want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers today, and a big thank you to everyone who's joined us live. I hope you found the webinar useful, as we'll be repairing this format at the end of each quarter, or repeating this format at the end of each quarter, so we can constantly assess where we are on our third-party cookieless journey and review what lies in store. Still got a lot to do as an industry, but with regular check-ins like this to share information and hear directly from partners like Google and industry stakeholders like Virtual Minds, Xaxis, Xander, I'm confident that we're going to get there. If you'd like to get more involved with this conversation and contribute to the Programmatic Trading Committee, then please drop us a line at communication@iabeurope.eu. It's open to all IAB Europe members, and the committee is a great opportunity to increase the industry's understanding of the programmatic ecosystem, even help shape the agenda, and then we can look at we can work out together what the impact is having on digital advertising, and influence, hopefully, industry initiatives to improve the ecosystem. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.